very honored this morning to have a guest with us who has had a very interesting experience to share with us. David Efron is our speaker, and he is a compassionate and energetic idea generator, often responsible for new cutting-edge products within the Department of Veteran Affairs. David currently serves as the health systems specialist for primary care in the VHA, with operational oversight to Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana. He has a bachelor's in business management from Ursuline College in Pepper Pike, Ohio, and an MBA in healthcare administration from Cleveland State University. He has been a member of Park Synagogue for more than 20 years. His favorite park memory is making lifelong friends on the Park Israel trip that he went on in 2012. When not at work, David enjoys spending time with his wife, Rachel, his daughters, Trudy and Mia, and his yellow lab, Oliver. His family has hosted 8 exchange students over the past 15 years from Germany, Japan, Belgium, Brazil, Italy, and a Shinshin, one of our Israeli guests, has been a part of his home family as well. He chairs the Woodmere Planning and Zoning Commission. When not doing all these things, he loves spending time on the water, is an avid sailor and yacht racer. David, thank you for your volunteering in Israel, and we're so excited to hear a little bit more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally honored to be able to come and talk today. So October 7th happened, and in my family we awoke, and we were just in such a state of disbelief for so long. Like, how could something like this happen? And it almost felt like, how could something like this happen again? There was this horrific scene unfolding before my eyes, really staying in a state of disbelief for a really long period of time. I kind of felt like it was a crazy wake-up call. And although it felt like a serious gut punch, I was really grasping with how to deal with my powerlessness right after October 7th. I worked from home, and I had the TV on way, way too much. And it was just those first 30 days, complete overload. Being glued to the TV, morning, noon, and night, still in shock. My family and I attended the rally at the Federation. And shortly after that, in early November, I was lucky enough to attend an after Shabbat gathering with some Agnon families. And there was a family there that had recently returned from Israel. They had visited their daughter, who's in the IDF. But much of the conversation that evening was about, really how can we as Jews in America, how can we help Israel right now? And that night I received, that was what the conversation was, is how can we help and are we safe here? After that night, I was really thinking, I need to go to Israel, I need to do something. And that evening, we got a recommendation that maybe I should look into this program called Sarel and see if I can be a volunteer with them. So literally, the next Monday, Tuesday, I called them, and they were like, yeah, we'd be happy to have you in February. And I was like, I really felt like I had to do something right now. And their program was 3 weeks long. Could I wait till February? Sure, but 3 weeks just really seemed like a long time to be away from my family and away from my job. And so I went on Facebook and I said, all right, world, what can I do? And I was put in touch with this guy that had started a program called the Israel Food Rescue, Rabbi Randy Brown. He works for the Department of Defense as a civilian rabbi. He also works at Fort Belvoir and Walter Reed National Medical Center. And basically his concept was simple. Buy your airline ticket, let them know you're coming, and make a donation to cover expenses while you're there on the ground. My wife and I, we dialed into a Zoom call for what they called orientation. It was just really a lot of folks asking silly questions, but it seemed legit enough for me to take the chance and do that. So I purchased my ticket on November 29th, barely 2 months after October 7th. I think if you ask my family, they'll tell you it takes me forever to make a decision. But in this case, I really was called. And I bought my ticket, and it was a little nerve-wracking after the purchase of that ticket. The thought was, people were like, "Are you really going to go?" They're like, "It's an active war zone. Are you really going to go?" And I was like, "Yes." I'm nervous about going, but yes, I'm still planning on going. I'm still planning on doing this thing. I'm really feeling called for doing this. About 10 days before I departed, I was talking with my youngest daughter, Mia, asking her if she was concerned, because I really wanted to make sure the family was really good with what I was doing. And she's like, "You're going to the holiest place on earth for Jews. You're going to be with God there. If something bad happens, what better place is there to be if something bad were to happen to you?" So I hopped on a plane on December 19th. I flew to New York, and I had arranged my travel to fly over with a bunch of other folks that were, as part of this mission. There were folks from Toronto, New York, Chicago, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Really all walks of life, age ranges from 18 to 78 as part of this group that I was flying over there with. So we arrive in Tel Aviv. We get to the hotel that we're being hosted out of. They're like, "Come to dinner with us at 6:30." And, I show up in this big dining hall, and there's 30 or 40 people there that are all part of this volunteer experience. There were some new friends, some old. So there were some people like myself that were just showing up for their first day. And then there were a whole bunch of people that were going home that night. Some folks that had been there for 30 days already. And so we were told to be in the lobby at 5:45 in the morning to catch the bus, and then we'd be working on a farm about an hour away in Beit Ezra. And I just want to kind of put this in perspective in terms of what this farm sort of looks like. It's greenhouses. Each greenhouse is probably the size of 10 football fields. So we're talking humongous farms. We're not talking like these little things we have in our backyards. We're talking serious farms. And like they had one that, I think they had 4, and it was nothing but tomatoes. And what we had learned was, it was 3 generations of farmers there, a grandmother, her son, and a couple of grandkids. And really all of their farm workers had fled or were expelled from the country after October 7th. And they actually had greenhouses that were full of produce that they were considering just bulldozing because they had nobody to harvest their crops. So our typical day there was we show up about 8:30. We have an Israeli breakfast, not the breakfast that we had when we went with the synagogue on our trip, which was like a full spread. But, this was pita hummus, Israeli salad, Turkish coffee, that sort of stuff. They tell us what we were picking that day. We'd work for 3 hours, have lunch, and then go pick vegetables for a couple more hours. So I really want to say that, like the signs and sounds of war were everywhere. Even on the farm, we were probably, I want to say 15 miles from the Gaza envelope, which is, that immediate area around Gaza. And that first day that we were there, we're hearing like off in the distance, the sound is just like thump, 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 thump. And when we asked about what that was, they said that's outgoing artillery. And the sound travels pretty far when it's sunny and not cloudy and stuff like that. On that first day, we did get an air raid siren that came across on our phones, and it says, "Hey, there's something being launched at you. It shows up on your phone. It says, you got 15 seconds to get to the bomb shelter. And we asked the Israelis that are with us, we're like, what should we do? They're like, you can lay down in the dirt. You'll probably be fine. So we lay down in the dirt. I didn't know any better. But we turned around, and they're just like standing there smoking cigarettes, looking at us all funny laying in the dirt. Yeah, and it was, and for much of what I felt like the average Israeli, it was really like just almost sort of just another day. That night I skipped dinner. We went out, grabbed falafel. If you haven't been to Jerusalem to have falafel, you're seriously missing out. We went to the shuk, and it was super empty. There were a lot of shops that were closed early. And I looked to see what the tourism rates there. They're down like 96% on their tourist rates today. But we were walking back to the hotel that we were staying at, and we stumbled on this impromptu prayer vigil celebration sort of thing. A lot of young people. There were a couple of guitars, some Israeli flags on the ground, lots of candles, and they were singing and dancing. And the feeling that I got from that was just this sort of thing of like, whoops, national unity and a lot of love just sort of like flowing, in the air. There was a teen girl that was walking around giving people like these little yellow bracelets in terms of for solidarity. And, we were talking to some of these just regular Israelis that are there, and they're like, number one, people were shocked that folks from America, Canada, other places would really just sort of check out of work for a couple weeks and come and volunteer and do like menial labor, sorting packages, volunteering on a farm. And that was really a common thread for us on our entire trip. The group doesn't work on Shabbat. For my Shabbat that I was there, I had Shabbat dinner with our Shin that we had hosted and her family several years earlier. I stopped in Hostage Square, and I was there at day 75. We're at day 203 now. So, I really thought that this thing was going to be over a long time ago. My last 4 days, I only worked on the farm for 5 days. Started with tomatoes, then I was upgraded to cucumbers, kohlrabi, cabbage, and maybe more tomatoes. And just so you have a perspective of these tomato plants, they plant them in the ground, they put a little wire on the top of them, and then as they grow, they kind of just creep them up and up and up. Most of these tomato plants are like 8 or 10 feet tall. So, and they've got, 80, 100 tomatoes on them. The day before I left, I played hooky. I walked through Jerusalem, spent a lot of money, went up to Neve Sharim so I could get some kippahs that actually stayed on my head. Because, typically when I come here, it's just always falling on the floor. And I met this shop owner in Jerusalem named Gabriel. And, I walk in there, and again, shocked that just your typical American would be here. And he says, so you're the first non-Israeli I've seen in a week in my shop. He just like grasped my hands. Gave me some sort of like prayer of thanks or gratitude for being there and volunteering. And for me, it was, just really, again, another super emotional experience, because not at all what I had expected when I signed up for this trip. My last night I went out for probably the only fancy dinner I had. I can't remember where it was, but it was a pretty nice meal as a goodbye for, all of these other folks like me that were heading home at the end of the week. And so, I came home, and one of the things that I definitely brought home from my time in Israel was, I felt this much broader connection. And I pledged in solidarity to wear a kippah every day until the hostages come home. And I've been doing that now since basically since January 31st. I want to just really quickly close with this article that was written, I think, in December. It was written by Bret Stephens. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times columnist. The article comes out of Aish, and it's called "Anti-Semites Thrive When Jews Are Embarrassed About Their Judaism." And he opens the article, he says, "There used to be a sign for which for all I know, is still there, somewhere in the CIA's headquarters that read, 'Every day is September 12th.' It was replaced there to remind the agency staffers that what they felt right after the attacks of September 11th, 2001, that sense of outrage and purpose, of favoring initiative over caution, of taking nothing for granted, had to be the mindset with which they arrived to work every day." And Brett goes on to say that there ought to be a similar sign in every Jewish organization, synagogue, day school, and on the desks of anyone, Jewish or not, for whom the security and well-being of Jews is a sacred calling. Every day is October 8th. Brett concludes more than 3,800 years of Jewish history keeps yielding the same bracing lesson. In the long run, we're alone. The October 8th Jew must find his or her own distinct Jewish voice, a voice informed and inspired by authentic Jewish wisdom. We must raise our voices of prayer and voices of study, our voices of Jewish unity and our voices of Torah insight, justice, and truth. Anti-Semites thrive when we are assimilated, apologetic, defensive, and embarrassed, or afraid about our Jewish identity and Jewish values. When we lower the volume of our Jewish voices, they are empowered to raise their hands against us and pounce. The October 8th Jew must confront these enemies, sometimes on the battlefield, other times at congressional hearings, other times in the courtroom. But the October 8th Jew must also confront himself and herself, confront their Jewish passion, Jewish pride, and Jewish practice. My newly found friends and I from all over the world are meeting up in December in Israel to volunteer for a couple more weeks. My wife's coming with us. And we're going to be working with a group called Leave Note this year. We don't have firm dates yet, but if anybody's interested, I'll extend the invitation to all of you. I have nothing else. Just thank you for the opportunity. I know that wasn't 45 minutes.
That was great.
Okay. All right.
David, thank
Thank
you,
you.
really. Thank you so much.